T-Rex, 40 feet long, 9 tons, apex predator, extinction. Triceratops, 30 feet long, 12 tons, armored tank, extinction. Microraptor, 2 feet long, 2 pounds, barely a snack. Survived. 1. Inherited the Earth. Size isn't everything. Sometimes it's nothing. Let me take you back 66 million years, to the final days of the Cretaceous period. This was the age of giants. Enormous creatures walked the Earth. Predators larger than buses, herbivores heavier than buildings, flying reptiles with wingspans wider than small planes. And among these titans was a creature no one took seriously. We'll call him Wing. Wing was a Microraptor, 24 inches long from snout to tail, weighing just over 2 pounds, about the same as a small chicken, covered in iridescent black feathers that shimmered blue and green in the sunlight. 4 wings, 2 on his arms and 2 on his legs, giving him the ability to glide between trees with remarkable agility. He lived in what would one day become China, in a dense forest of conifers and flowering plants. The canopy was his kingdom. The branches were his highways. The air was his domain. But no one cared. To the other dinosaurs, Wing was barely worth acknowledging. He was too small to be prey for most predators, not enough meat to justify the effort of catching him, too weak to compete for resources, too insignificant to be considered a real dinosaur. The larger raptors, his own distant cousins, openly mocked him. Velociraptors, standing 6 feet tall and weighing 30 pounds, would see Wing gliding overhead and bark dismissively. To them, he was an evolutionary joke, a dinosaur that had given up being a dinosaur, a creature that chose to hide in trees instead of standing his ground. The herbivores didn't even notice him. What threat could a 2-pound creature pose to animals weighing tons? And the apex predators? They looked right through him. Wing was beneath their consideration, invisible, irrelevant. But Wing didn't care. He had something the giants didn't have. Something they had sacrificed in their race to grow larger, stronger, more dominant. Efficiency. Wing's body required almost no food, a few insects, some small lizards, occasionally bird eggs stolen from nests. That was enough. While a T-Rex needed to kill and consume hundreds of pounds of meat daily just to survive, Wing could go days on what amounted to a snack. His small size meant he could live in places the big predators couldn't reach. The dense canopy, the thin branches, the narrow caves and cliff faces, and his 4 wings, that evolutionary quirk that made him look so ridiculous to the other dinosaurs, gave him an ability that no other creature his size possessed. True controlled gliding. He could leap from one tree and land precisely on a branch 50 feet away. He could change direction mid-flight. He could escape danger in 3 dimensions, while his predators were stuck on the ground. But none of that mattered to the other dinosaurs, because in their world, power was everything. Size was everything. Strength was everything. Wing was nothing. Or so they thought. The day started like any other day in the late Cretaceous. Wing woke in his nest, a small hollow in an ancient conifer, lined with soft moss and feathers. The morning sun filtered through the canopy. The air was warm and humid. The forest was alive with the sounds of countless creatures going about their routines. Wing preened his feathers carefully. Maintenance was important. His flight feathers needed to be perfectly aligned, each barb interlocked with precision. A damaged feather could mean the difference between a successful glide and a fatal fall. He was hungry. He spread his 4 wings and leaped from his branch, catching the air current and gliding silently through the canopy. His target, a cluster of beetle larvae he had spotted the previous evening, burrowing in dead wood about 100 feet to the east. As he glided, he passed over a clearing where a young Tarbosaurus, a cousin of T-Rex, was feeding on a fresh kill. The massive predator, easily 15,000 times Wing's weight, didn't even glance up. Wing was so far beneath his notice that he might as well have been invisible. Wing landed on the dead tree and began excavating the larvae. Fat, protein-rich, perfect. He ate his fill, maybe 20 larvae total, barely an ounce of food. But it was enough. His tiny metabolism was satisfied. He spent the morning doing what he did every morning: gliding, hunting, grooming, watching, always watching. That's when he saw it. At first, it was just a bright streak in the sky, far to the southeast, visible even in the bright morning light. A shooting star. Wing had seen shooting stars before. They were common, pretty, harmless. But this one didn't fade. It grew brighter, and brighter, and brighter. Wing's tiny dinosaur brain didn't have the capacity to understand what he was seeing. He couldn't comprehend asteroids or extinction events or global catastrophes. He just knew that something felt wrong. The other animals felt it too. The normal forest sounds began to change. Birds stopped singing. Small mammals retreated to burrows. A herd of sauropods in the distance began moving faster than normal, their deep bellowing carrying an edge of panic. And then, impact. 1,800 miles away, the Chicxulub asteroid struck the Yucatan Peninsula with the force of 10 billion atomic bombs. Wing didn't see the impact. He didn't hear it initially. He was too far away. What he experienced first was the light. The sky to the southeast suddenly blazed as bright as 100 suns. The entire horizon turned white. Even squinting into his nest, Wing could see the light through the wood. Then came the heat. A wave of scorching air swept across the forest. Not the killing heat that incinerated everything near the impact site, but enough to make the temperature spike from comfortable to oppressive in seconds. Wing's feathers ruffled involuntarily. His instincts screamed danger. And then, the sound arrived. A roar like nothing he had ever heard. Like thunder, but continuous. Like a waterfall, but angrier. Like every terrifying sound in nature combined and amplified 1,000 times. The shockwave was coming. Wing's survival instincts, honed by 120 million years of small, vulnerable ancestors learning to hide, took over. He didn't try to fly. He didn't try to run. He did what small creatures do best. He made himself invisible. Wing squeezed into the deepest part of his nest hollow, pulled his wings tight against his body, and went absolutely still. The shockwave hit like a physical wall. Trees didn't just fall, they exploded. The forest that had stood for thousands of years was leveled in seconds. Massive trunks that had taken centuries to grow snapped like twigs. Branches became projectiles. Leaves were stripped away and shredded. Wing's tree shook violently. He could feel it bending, hear it cracking. For a moment, he thought it would fall, but it held. Because Wing hadn't chosen the tallest tree. He hadn't chosen the strongest tree. He had chosen a medium-sized tree, flexible enough to bend in strong winds, protected by larger trees around it that absorbed the worst of the blast. The larger dinosaurs didn't have that option. The Tarbosaurus he had seen that morning, thrown like a toy. Its massive body, which had seemed so invincible an hour ago, tumbled across the ground, bones shattering on impact. The sauropod herd, knocked over like dominoes. Their enormous size made them easy targets for the shockwave. There was no hiding, no taking cover, just exposure. The velociraptors that had mocked Wing that morning, they tried to run, but there was nowhere to run to. The shockwave was everywhere at once. Wing, pressed into his tiny hollow in a medium-sized tree, survived. Not because he was strong, because he was small, because he was insignificant, because he had mastered the art of being invisible. The shockwave passed. The deafening roar faded to an eerie silence. Wing waited. This was the key to his survival. While larger creatures would emerge immediately to assess the situation, Wing's instincts told him to wait, to be still, to be sure. He stayed in his hollow for hours, waiting, listening. When he finally emerged, The world had changed. The forest was gone. What had been a dense canopy full of life was now a landscape of shattered trunks and bare ground. The sky was dark, choked with dust and debris thrown up by the impact, and everywhere, bodies. Dead dinosaurs, dozens of them. Some killed by the shockwave, some by falling trees, some by flying debris. Wing glided down from his damaged tree, one of the few still standing, and landed on the forest floor. For the first time in his life, he was at ground level during the day. Normally, this would be suicidal. The ground was where predators hunted, where he would be vulnerable. But today, there were no predators, just the dead and the dying. A juvenile Triceratops, crushed by a falling tree, was still breathing. Its eyes followed Wing as he walked past. But it couldn't move, couldn't threaten, couldn't do anything but wait for death. A Velociraptor, one of the ones who had mocked Wing that morning, was trapped under debris. Its leg was shattered. It hissed at Wing, still trying to maintain its superior attitude. But they both knew the truth. The Velociraptor was dying. Wing was not. Wing didn't gloat. He didn't feel superior. He simply moved on, searching for food. And he found it. The devastation had exposed countless insects, grubs buried in the ground, beetles fleeing destroyed logs, termites whose mounds had been shattered. For Wing, it was a feast. He ate methodically, efficiently, taking advantage of the sudden abundance while it lasted. As night fell, though the darkness was barely different from the ash-choked day, Wing returned to his nest. His tree was damaged but standing. His hollow was intact. He slept. The next days were harder. The firestorm came. Superheated debris falling from the sky, setting the remaining forests ablaze. Wing stayed in his nest, protected by the lack of vegetation around him. The shockwave had already stripped his area bare, so there was nothing left to burn. Larger dinosaurs tried to flee the fires, but there was nowhere to go. The fires were everywhere, and their size made them easy targets for the falling debris. Wing, in his small hollow in his medium-sized tree, survived. The impact winter came. Dust and ash blocked out the sun for months, maybe years. Temperatures plummeted. Plants died. The entire food chain began to collapse. The large herbivores starved first. They needed hundreds of pounds of vegetation daily. When the plants died, they had no backup plan. They simply starved. Slowly. Painfully. Wing watched them die. Massive creatures, dozens of tons each, lying still as their bodies consumed themselves. Their size, once their greatest advantage, became their death sentence. The bigger they were, the more food they needed. The more food they needed, the faster they starved. Wing needed a fraction of what they needed. A few insects, some carrion, seeds, small lizards that could survive on even less. He was hungry, but he survived. The predators died next. As the herbivores died, the predators lost their food source. Some tried to turn to scavenging, but there wasn't enough carrion to support populations of multi-ton carnivores. T-Rex, the apex predator, the king of dinosaurs, the most powerful land predator to ever exist, starved. Their massive jaws, designed to crush bone, were useless when there was no prey to hunt. Their powerful legs, built for chasing down Triceratops, carried them nowhere. They simply stopped, lay down, and died. Wing found one once, a juvenile T-Rex, maybe a year old, already dead from starvation. Its body alone could have fed Wing for weeks, but Wing only ate a small portion. His tiny stomach couldn't hold more. The rest rotted or was consumed by insects. The irony wasn't lost on evolution. The creature that was barely a snack was thriving, while the apex predator starved. Months turned into years. The impact winter began to ease. Some plants returned, opportunistic species, that could grow in disturbed soil. Ferns, mosses, small flowering plants. And with the plants came insects, and with the insects came small vertebrates, and with them came Wing's descendants. Wing himself lived for 3 more years after the impact. In dinosaur terms, that was a long life for a creature his size. He had offspring. His daughters had offspring. His genetic line continued, and over the next 66 million years, that line would evolve, would adapt, would diversify. Microraptor's descendants didn't just survive. They exploded into every ecological niche available. They developed specialized beaks. They perfected powered flight instead of just gliding. They spread to every continent. They became birds. The sparrow outside your window? Wing's great-great-great times several million. Grandchild. The eagle soaring overhead? Wing's descendant? The chicken in your dinner? Directly descended from the creature that survived when T-Rex didn't. Today, there are more than 10,000 species of birds. That's more than all the mammals. More diversity, more individuals, more success than almost any other vertebrate group. They inherited the Earth. Not through strength, not through size, not through dominance, through efficiency, through adaptability, through the ability to be small, quick, and invisible when it mattered most. The giants died because they couldn't adapt fast enough. They needed too much. They were too specialized, too dependent on a world that no longer existed. Wing survived because he needed almost nothing, because he could hide anywhere, because he was insignificant enough that the apocalypse barely noticed him. Evolution doesn't care about being impressive. It doesn't reward the strongest or the largest. It rewards whoever can reproduce in the environment that actually exists. For 165 million years, dinosaurs ruled through size and strength. They were the most successful land animals in Earth's history. They dominated every ecosystem. And then the world changed in a single day. And all that size, all that strength, all that dominance meant nothing. The creature they mocked, the dinosaur they didn't even consider a real threat. The evolutionary joke, with 4 wings and a body weight measured in pounds. That was the one who survived. That was the one who inherited the world. If you go to a natural history museum today, you'll see reconstructed skeletons of the great dinosaurs. Massive T-Rex standing triumphant. Enormous Brachiosaurus reaching for the sky. Armored Triceratops ready for battle. And in the corner, maybe in a glass case, you might see a tiny Microraptor fossil. Easy to miss. Not impressive. Just a small, crow-sized skeleton with weird extra wings. Most people walk right past it. But if you stop, if you really look, if you understand what you're seeing, you're looking at a winner. Not the biggest, not the strongest, not the most impressive, but the one that mattered. Because that tiny fossil represents a fundamental truth about life on Earth. Success isn't about being the best. It's about being good enough when everything falls apart. The giants had a million advantages. Better weapons, better armor, better hunting skills, better everything. Except one thing. They couldn't hide. And when the world ended, hiding was the only skill that mattered. Wing didn't defeat T-Rex in combat. He didn't outrun Velociraptor. He didn't outcompete Triceratops. He simply outlasted them all. By being small, by being efficient, by being the creature no one took seriously, by being invisible. And 66 million years later, his descendants are everywhere. In every park, every forest, every city, every continent. While T-Rex exists only in fossils and movies, Wing's children own the sky. They wake you up in the morning. They build nests in your gutters. They steal your French fries at outdoor cafes. They migrate thousands of miles. They dive into oceans for fish. They hunt rodents in the night. They are the most successful dinosaurs to ever exist. And they got there by being small enough that no one saw them as a threat. Size isn't everything. Sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes the smallest creature in the room is the one who survives when everyone else falls. Sometimes being too insignificant to notice is the greatest evolutionary advantage. Sometimes the joke has the last laugh. Wing never knew he won. He lived his life hiding from giants, being mocked by predators, considered irrelevant by everything larger than him. But he lived, and his genes survived. And 66 million years later, his descendants rule the skies while the giants are dust. That's not irony. That's evolution. And evolution doesn't care if you're impressive. It only cares if you survive.